you've put forward plans to cut the number of MPs by 10%. What do you hope this will achieve? And can you tell us specifically how many West Midlands MPs will be lost as a result of this?
What it's meant to achieve is a reduced cost of politics to the taxpayer. We have, if you add the House of Commons and the House of Lords together, we've got more parliamentarians in Britain than any other country pretty much in the world other than China, which of course has 1.3 billion people. We have more people in our parliament than the United States Congress, or than the German Reichstag, or even than the Indian parliament that was elected a couple of weeks ago. So we can reduce that. Clearly it's not easy to reduce it because you have to redraw all the boundaries of all the constituencies, which leads on to the second part of your question. And that needs a boundary review, but we would instruct the next boundary review to reduce the number of MPs by 10%. What would that do to the West Midlands? Well, that would be up to the boundary commissioners, and it depends how the population of the West Midlands, whether it's gone up or down at that point. But roughly speaking, of course, it would reduce all the regions by a 10%, roughly 10% amount, subject to population changes.
There are some potential drawbacks in reducing the number of MPs.
Well, the argument against it would be that the MPs would be more thinly spread. The constituencies would, of course, be 10% bigger, and so every MP would have to represent more people. And you could say, well, they'll be less in touch with whichever village or town because they're representing a bigger area. However, I don't think a 10% change changes that. Fundamentally, my constituency in my 20 years in Parliament has gone up and down, has been altered by 10 or 20%, and I don't think it changed the service that I gave to people as their Member of Parliament.
Okay, talking about the economy now, unemployment in the West Midlands is higher than any other region. It's 9.3%. The Conservative Party doesn't advocate handing out subsidies to help failing businesses such as LDV and Land Rover. So what would you do to help the West Midlands and, those businesses which are really on the brink?
This is a credit crunch. That's how it's been accurately described for a long time. And since November, the Conservative Party has been calling for a much bigger, bolder national loan guarantee scheme. Because if credit is the problem, well, then we have to make sure that credit is available from banks to the businesses. The government guaranteed the lending from banks to each other, but not from banks to the rest of the economy, or not in any serious way. And that is what we've been calling for all along now, since last autumn, a £50 billion scheme that we have advocated that would, in effect, ensure the lending from banks to businesses and help, I think, particularly the manufacturing sector at a very difficult time. But of course, it would boost confidence in the economy as a whole.
Talking about David Cameron, obviously you're pushing for an election. You're asking for one as soon as possible. What do you think he's got that Gordon Brown hasn't, which will help to lift the country out of the economic crisis?
Well, he's got a decisiveness and an ability to communicate to people that I think a Prime Minister needs. And I think, to be frank, Gordon Brown has often lacked those things. He would have the authority, David Cameron, of being the elected Prime Minister if and when we win a general election. Gordon Brown has never had that authority because no one has ever voted for him to be Prime Minister. And I think that a change of government in itself would help to create some confidence. We've just seen this in America. The election of President Obama has probably helped economic optimism about the future. The change of government in
America's still in a massive economic crisis.
It is, but I think people have. I think they have been able to feel more optimistic about the medium-term future because of a change of government. Whatever the merits of the policies being pursued, they can see that there's a government there for the next 4 or 8 years, and I think also people would be able to see under a Conservative government that the fundamental problem was being addressed. We have drifted under Gordon Brown into a debt crisis of enormous proportions. The borrowing over the next 2 years that this government intends to carry out is more than the borrowing of 300 years of governments up to 1997. And I think it's only a new government and only a Conservative government that is going to get a grip on that debt crisis. And without that, we won't have the long-term confidence in the future of our economy.
And obviously you were former leader of the Conservative Party. What does David Cameron offer that perhaps you didn't when you were leader?
Oh, much more. He's much better than me. Although I enjoy being part of his team. I think he's an all-round communicator. I think he's interested in all areas of policy. And he is a good team manager.
You weren't a team manager?
I wasn't a bad team manager, but I think he has a bit more patience with people who I would say just get on with it. And he knows how to coax the best out of people as well as tell them to deliver their best. He's good all round on those things. So that makes him a good leader. And I can really see him as Prime Minister. I work with him every day. And I've known all the people who've been Prime Minister for the last 30 years in this country, and I can absolutely see him doing that job as Prime Minister.
Some people say he lacks a bit of substance. Perhaps, the opposite was true of yourself. You had a lot of substance, but perhaps lacked a little bit of public image. What would you say to that?
I don't think that's true. I think if you listen to what he says and see his interviews, the substance is all there. I think that people often do say this about a leader of the opposition, because of course you can't prove as leader of the opposition that you will do things that you say you're going to do. It's only when you're the Prime Minister that you can prove that. And I remember 30 years ago, the first election I ever voted in as a new 18-year-old voter, them saying about Margaret Thatcher, well, is she strong enough and does she have substance? Well, whatever they said about her later, good or bad, they couldn't doubt that she had the substance. And I think the same will be true of David Cameron. Okay,
just finally then, do you miss being leader of the Conservative Party? Would you ever see it?
No, I'm not doing that again in this lifetime. I never regretted taking it on, but I never regretted giving it up. And I'm much happier in my own skin in this role now, where I help David Cameron. I'm always there to give him advice and ideas and to do the foreign policy side of things. I'm very happy in that slot. And I don't see myself ever being leader of the party.
Mr. Hague, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.